Okay, so let's get right into it. This is the central question we're going to try and unravel today. We're going to push aside all the cinematic flair and really decode the ancient texts, things like the Dhanurvedam and the Mahabharata, to see what they actually say about this weapon. Come on, let's figure this out together.
All right, so first things first, we have to understand the technology. What exactly was this weapon? And to do that, we need to dive into the ancient science of warfare, the Dhanurvedam, which makes a really clear and super important distinction.
Now check this out, because this is where it gets really interesting. There's this fundamental split in ancient weaponry. On one side, you have the Shastra. Now, these are your physical tools: swords, spears, maces. Pretty straightforward. Their power comes directly from the warrior strength. But then you have the Astra, and this is a whole different ballgame. It's not about muscle at all. It's about energy that's invoked by sound in the mind.
So what even is an astra? Well, the texts define it as a weapon that's been energized by something called a mantram. Just think of a mantram as a very specific sonic code, a vibration. When this code is spoken or invoked, it can transform a totally simple object, like an arrow or even just a blade of grass, into something capable of absolute mass destruction. We're talking about weaponized sound and spiritual energy here.
So, and this is the most crucial point. We have to kind of correct our modern thinking. The BRAHMASTRA isn't some physical bomb sitting in a silo waiting to be launched. No, it's the activation of a destructive process. It's literally the conversion of potential energy into apocalyptic kinetic energy through a very specific, very advanced technique. And listen, this isn't just some vague idea of magic. The texts get surprisingly specific about it. The Aharbudaniya Samhita says its composition contains air, fire, and cosmic poison. It's described as being greatly radiant. I mean, these are very particular, elemental descriptions of an incredibly powerful and frankly terrifying force.
Okay, so now that we've kind of established what this weapon was, an energy-based process, let's get into why so many people draw a direct line from it to nuclear weapons. The answer, it turns out, is in the aftermath, the effects that are described with just horrifying detail in the epics.
Let's start with the first piece of evidence, the incredible, mind-bending heat and light. The texts are just filled with descriptions of a weapon that is, above all else, blindingly bright and unimaginably hot. And this table just lays the parallel out perfectly. The Mahabharata describes a fierce fireball and blazing energy. I mean, that sounds exactly like the thermal radiation wave from a nuclear blast. The texts say glaciers melt and mountains shatter. Well, a modern nuke hits temperatures over 10 million degrees Celsius. So that description isn't just poetic license, it's a shockingly accurate account of the effect.
Okay, let's move on to the next piece of evidence, which is maybe even more chilling because it talks about the long-term devastation, what happens to the environment after the blast. The texts say that in the land where a powerful version of this weapon was used, there would be no rain for 12 Brahma years, which is just a cosmically long period of time, basically meaning for ages. And not even a single blade of grass would grow. You guys, this is a perfect description of what we now call nuclear winter and the effects of soil irradiation. It makes land completely barren for generations. The parallel here is just, it's undeniable. And now for the most disturbing piece of evidence, the impact on life itself. The texts don't just describe big explosions. They detail the horrific effects on living things, right down to the genetic level. In one really famous story, the weapon is directed at an unborn child still in the womb. I mean, a clear attempt to cause genetic destruction. And the curse put on the user, Ashwatthama, was that he would wander the earth with unhealing sores oozing blood and pus. Attacking the unborn and causing persistent, non-healing wounds, those are precise symptoms of genetic damage and acute radiation syndrome, ARS, from ionizing radiation.
Okay, the evidence is pretty compelling, I know, but this brings up a huge question, right? If these warriors really had weapons this powerful, why wasn't the entire world just wiped out? Well, the answer lies in a concept that is very, very familiar to us today: strategic deterrence. Yeah, it's a fair question, a really fair question. If you have world-ending power, the temptation to use it must be pretty huge. But the texts show that this power came with an equally huge sense of responsibility and a very strict code of conduct. The use of the Brahmastra was governed by dharma, which you can think of as a moral, ethical code. It was not a conventional weapon to just be used in any old battle. The person using it had to understand that invoking it was a world-ending act, capable of destroying entire planes of existence, or lokas. We're talking entire worlds or dimensions. It was purely a weapon of last resort. It was a deterrent. And we actually see this play out in what can only be described as an ancient version of mutually assured destruction. So first, Ashwathama and Arjuna both launch their ultimate weapons at each other. Then, the sages intervene, because they foresee a cataclysm that the earth just couldn't survive. They order both of them to stand down. Arjuna, being the disciplined warrior, is able to recall his weapon, but Ashwathama, who lacks that same control, can't. This just goes to show you there were clear protocols and a deep understanding of the apocalyptic stakes. So after looking at the technology, the effects, and this idea of deterrence, what's our final verdict? Is the BRAHMASTRA actually a nuclear weapon? The simplest way to put it is this. The method of delivery, the technology, it seems to be completely different from ours, but the devastating result is functionally identical. So here's the final breakdown. The how is different. It's a technology based on sound and consciousness, not nuclear fission or fusion. The power source is different. It harnesses the fundamental forces of the universe, not plutonium. And yet, the outcome, from the thermal radiation all the way to the genetic damage, is a terrifying mirror of our own nuclear capabilities. And all of this leaves us with a really profound question. It's not just about whether the BRAHMASTRA was a nuke, it's about what it means if it was. Does it point to some kind of lost scientific paradigm, one where consciousness and physics were deeply intertwined? Are these ancient texts just elaborate epic poetry? Or are they a factual warning from a civilization so advanced we've completely forgotten they even existed?